Welcome to our panel on Ohio politics. My name is Dr. Matt Akers, and I serve as Public Liaison for the Office of the President and as Associate Director of the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics at the University of Akron. The Bliss Institute is a bipartisan research, teaching, and experiential learning institute dedicated to increasing understanding of the political process, with a special emphasis on political parties, grassroots activity, civility and ethics, and hands-on learning through internships and events. We are honored to have three experts on Ohio politics joining us this afternoon. We have Mr. Derrick Clay, who is President and CEO of New Visions Group, Dr. John C. Green, Director Emeritus of the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics, and Mr. Bob Paduchik, President of Agincourt Consultants and, as of February 26th, Chair of the Ohio Republican Party. They will discuss issues directly affecting Ohio politics, including the 2022 Senate race, redistricting, and other pivotal issues affecting Ohio and the nation. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that all three of our panelists are connected to the Bliss Institute. Dr. Green, of course, is Director Emeritus, and both Derrick and Bob were students at the University of Akron and of Dr. Green. We are grateful to have such great alumni and faculty. It's appropriate that we are holding this Ohio political panel on the first Wednesday in March, which is the day we traditionally gather in Washington, D.C. to celebrate Ohio's birthday. While we can't be in person this year, we have added this Ohio political panel to our agenda, which we have not been able to do at our in-person celebrations. Immediately after this panel, starting around 4:15, we will have a virtual Ohio birthday celebration with greetings from Ohio's elected officials, and we'll even do a cutting of the Ohio birthday cake. I want to thank all of our sponsors who make the Ohio birthday party possible. And I want to thank one of our sponsors, the Greater Akron Chamber, for producing this virtual event. Before our panelists begin the conversation, let me give you an overview of our agenda. In a moment, I will introduce our panelists. They will have a brief conversation, and then we'll open it up to questions. You can ask a question at any time using the chat function, and our panelists will address those questions when we get to the question and answer period. Now let me go ahead and introduce our three panelists. After a career in state and national politics, Mr. Derrick Clay joined New Visions Group in 2004 as vice president and partner. He became CEO after acquiring the firm in 2014. Previously, he served as Midwest Political Director for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Ohio State Director for the Gore-Lieberman 2000 presidential campaign, a member of the historic Florida Recount Committee, and as Executive Director of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, among many other leadership roles. Guided by the principles of accountability, responsibility, focus, and teamwork, Derrick's passion for politics and business dates back to his days as president of the undergraduate student government at the University of Akron. Welcome to the panel, Derrick. Dr. John C. Green is Director Emeritus of the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics. His more than 30 years of service at the University of Akron includes time as interim president of the university, dean and interim dean of Buckeye College of Arts and Sciences, vice dean for liberal arts, chair of the Department of Political Science, and interim chair for 5 other departments. He is also senior research advisor to the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life, and a political scholar whose insights are frequently reported by national newspapers and major broadcasters, as well as state and local news outlets. His published works include 9 books, 32 edited books, 39 refereed journal articles, and 120 other scholarly and popular publications. I think, though, that I need to add one more book to his publishing total because he just published Secular Surge, which is a book about the rise of secularism in American politics earlier this year. He received his PhD from Cornell University and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Colorado. Welcome, Dr. Green. And our final panelist is Mr. Bob Paduchik, and he is an accomplished strategist with 3 decades of experience leading political and public affairs campaigns. He is recognized by many political professionals as one of the outstanding campaign managers in America and an expert in Ohio politics. Mr. Paduchik has gained extensive experience advising Republican campaigns at the local, state, and federal level. He is a proven leader of multi-million-dollar initiatives representing the energy sector and other industries. He currently serves as president of Agincourt Consultants and is chair of the Ohio Republican Party. He recently served as a senior advisor for Donald Trump's 2020 presidential re-election campaign. And he was also the campaign's Ohio State Director in 2016 and co-chairman of the Republican National Committee from 2017 to 2019. And welcome, Bob. I will now turn things over to Dr. Green.
Well, thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for organizing this panel. Derrick and Bob, great to have you with us today to do what I like to do, which is to talk politics. 2020 was a really important year politically, but one reason was because of the census, which occurs every 10 years. And that means that 2021 is the redistricting year here in Ohio, but across the country in every state, as state legislative and congressional districts are redrawn to match the census. As many of our listeners and viewers will know, 2021 and redistricting in Ohio is going to be a little bit different because in recent years, the state constitution has been changed as to the criteria and process by which new districts are drawn. So I think it would be really appropriate to begin our discussion with redistricting and how you all see the new procedures and criteria affecting the outcome going forward. And let's start with you, Derrick. What do you think about redistricting and how do you think the new process will work?
Well, first off, let me thank the University of Akron, you, Dr. Green, the Greater Akron Chamber, and of course, my friend Bob Paduchik. I've been knowing Bob for several years, and we've been battling on opposite sides of the aisle, but have always maintained a very good, cordial friendship. And I told him before we got started that I wish him the worst luck in the world in his new job. But of course, I was joking a little bit. But to get to your question, Dr. Green, redistricting is something that, of course, comes upon us every 10 years. It's a very important step that we take in our state to draw our congressional and state legislative district lines. And we saw earlier this week that the census data is going to be delayed until September. And usually that information comes out by the early spring. So we are definitely now where we're going to have to be doing everything in our power to make sure that we are moving towards getting the redistricting process off the ground. And although the data is going to be delayed until September, there's several things that the legislature can do right now. I mean, there's a public submission bill that has to be passed by the legislature. Those are things that the Republicans can actually start right now, along with the Democrats. That's a bipartisan thing where the public will actually have a say-so in how these legislative districts are drawn. I mean, there's $5 million that's sitting in an account right now that can go to both the Democrat and Republican caucuses, so that we can fund our map drawers and all that type of stuff. And so the redistricting process, the voters voted in 2015 and 2018 to change the process. And if the lines are not drawn satisfactorily, they can be redrawn in 4 years. So that is something that we need to pay very close attention to. But we should definitely be calling on our legislative leaders to get this public submission bill underway and release the funds to the Democrat and Republican caucuses.
Well, thank you, Derrick. Bob, what's your perspective?
I think first off, I want to thank the Greater Akron Chamber, the Bliss Institute, you, Dr. Green, and of course, Derrick. Now, Derrick, one thing that was left out in Matt's introduction is I was the vice president of student government. And while that doesn't sound as good, it's the person that chairs the executive budget committee at the university. And that was a great job. Let me just tell you.
It was.
But no, I think the interesting part about this is the changes to the rules. You still have an apportionment board and you have a process. And one of the things that I like to focus on here that I think really sets up sort of a clue to how districts might look in the state of Ohio is this one line here, and I want to get this correct. It's maintaining the whole government units. And what that means in layman's term is first, keep counties from being broken up, then keep townships from being broken up, and then keep municipal boundaries from being broken up. So it really creates a situation, if you follow those guidelines in a district that you're drawing things differently than they've been done in the past. If we had a map here to show you, you would see these crazy squiggly lines for Marcy Kaptur or Bill Johnson. You know, most of that situation is going to go away. And then I think that's a starting point for people to kind of predict where we are and what's going on. And I'm really trying to deal with this glare situation here in my office. But that's my thoughts on it.
You know, there is a reason to believe that there is at least one congressional seat due to the census. You know, we don't have the final numbers yet. But you know, if you all just had to guess, you know, in a strictly academic way, which of our districts would most likely disappear if we had to go, you know, from 16 to 15? Bob, what do you think?
I would have to say that if you look at the way things are drawn, and you know, you keep in fact that we're trying not to break up any counties or anything, you're also trying to keep the rules of the whole unit intact. I think, you know, Marcy Kaptur is the odd person out in that situation.
Derrick, how do you see that working out?
Well, I mean, you know, there's one of two districts that I see could potentially be drawn out during this process. One is the Tim Ryan seat, and the other is the Marcy Kaptur seat. You know, but keep in mind, you know, these lines were drawn by the Republicans 10 years ago. So these are lines that have been drawn by the GOP. And the interesting thing about the Kaptur seat is it goes from Toledo all the way over to Cleveland, you know, so that is very much a gerrymandered district. I mean, when you look at the Tim Ryan seat, it goes, you know, all the way from Mahoning County, all the way down the Ohio River there. So if I had to make a prediction, I mean, it's going to be either Tim Ryan or Marcy Kaptur's seat. Strategically from the Republican side, I'm sure that they would want the Marcy Kaptur seat to go away because she's been such a strong Democrat in Congress for a long time. And, you know, the only way that she would probably be removed from Congress is if that seat is eliminated. So that is, that's the one that we got to be watching out for.
Well, what effect do you think it would have if a member of Congress decided, say, to run for the Senate or run for governor? I mean, no names mentioned, but there are some names that are you know, being discussed out there. But does that figure out? Is it easier to eliminate a seat if there's no incumbent? Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, it's sort of a parlor game, and I want to be clear. Any conversation I have, I'm not drawing any of these lines at this point, so that I'm not trying to give any kind of indication of what I think it should look like or not. But I mean, there is a parlor game out there where every member, and you can talk to any member of the congressional delegation, all of them are concerned about this process to some degree or the other. And so everyone's a little bit jumpy about how this thing may play itself out. I would say in terms of that kind of strategic viewpoint, I don't think that that's going to be playing a factor, at least on the Republican side of things.
What do you think, Derrick? Does possible running for higher office, vacating a seat, does that make a difference in your opinion?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know if it makes a difference in terms of what district gets cut out. I mean, you know, obviously the Republicans are going to be looking to draw districts that are to their advantage. You know, if Democrats had the pen, we would be doing the same thing. But yeah, there are, you know, folks that are talking about running for statewide office, you know, in terms of the U.S. Senate seat. I've heard Tim Ryan's name. And if he does decide to do that, then, you know, of course, that seat would be up for grabs unless it's eliminated.
Well, thank you. Of course, when these districts are finally drawn, whether they're at the state level or at the congressional level, they'll take effect for the first time in 2022, which is shaping up to be a really pretty interesting election. Of course, we have the dynamic of the party that controls the White House, in this case, the Democrats, tend not to do as well in midterm elections as the party that's out of power. And that could be really important because of the very narrow margins of Democratic control in the US House and the US Senate. But of course, some other interesting things are happening. Senator Portman, Republican senator from Ohio, has announced he won't run for re-election. That's pretty interesting for 2022. And then, of course, we have a gubernatorial election. All the other statewide constitutional offices currently controlled by Republicans will be up for election, and including, in this particular election, the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. So let's start with you, Bob, and let's start with the gubernatorial race. How do you see gubernatorial politics playing out in 2022?
Well, let me first add to that list the fact that, and it goes without being stated perhaps, is that every member of Congress is going to be running in a new district. How much that district changes remains to be seen, but that's one more challenge that as I'm working with the state party to prepare for an important election cycle that we're seeing in those things. Look, we're in a situation right now where we have an incumbent Republican governor. That's always a strong position to run from. The power of incumbency in the state of Ohio, is particularly advantageous, and it has an impact. The governor's how well a governor does in the election cycle has an impact down the ticket. We've seen that historically. I wouldn't expect that to change much in the next election cycle.
Derrick, what do you think the Democrats will do in 2022? Are there any strong names out there that might run against Governor DeWine?
Well, Dr. Green, there are plenty of strong names on the Democratic side of the aisle. I mean, when you think about Nan Whaley, who's the current mayor of Dayton, who's recently stated that she's going to step down. You know, there is Tim Ryan, who is I'm not sure if he's going to run for U.S. Senate or run for governor. But you know, you can't discount folks like Minority Leader Amelia Sykes, or Kevin Boyce, who is a Franklin County Commissioner and president of the Franklin County Commissioner, who also runs statewide. You know, we have plenty of good, qualified people on the Democratic side of the aisle. It's just a matter of who's going to step out there and run for governor.
Let's stay with you, Derrick. You know, we're talking about potential Democratic candidates in the gubernatorial race. Talk a little bit about potential candidates for the U.S. Senate race, besides Congressman Tim Ryan, whom we've already mentioned.
Sure. So, you know, a couple names have surfaced for the U.S. Senate race. You know, Dr. Acton, who was the former health director, has stated that she's going to run. You know, I'll still throw a couple other names out there that I just mentioned. You know, Minority Leader Amelia Sykes, or not state treasurer, he used to be state treasurer, Kevin Boyce. You know, and up until maybe a week or so ago, you know, Joyce's name was being floated around as well, but she has since declined, and she's running the Congressional Black Caucus now. So, you know, there are some names out there that have been floating around. We don't know who might step out within the next year or so to go for these races, but I think that the Democrats have a very, very bright future.
Well, Bob, let's turn and get your opinions on the U.S. Senate race. You know, I was quite surprised when Senator Portman stepped down. I mean, maybe you and others weren't, but I was surprised. So who do you see as the strong potential nominees or people who would primary candidates on the Republican side?
Well, it's an interesting situation as a state party chairman because I'm friends with a lot of people that are running. I'm friends with Josh Mandel, with Jane Kempkin, Bernie Moreno. There are a number of members of Congress that are closely looking at this as well. And so we have a lot of great candidates there. I would disagree with Derrick a little bit. I think the Democrats have a bench problem, particularly for any statewide campaign. Ohio is a state of city states. And if you're making that jump, either as a member of Congress or county commissioner, and especially as a mayor, to go and to run statewide, it is a very difficult and daunting task. If you have not done it before, you are at a big disadvantage to someone that has run statewide, has the considerable benefits of name identification, but also understands that it's Lima, Ohio, and Xenia, Ohio, and not Xenia, Ohio. And if you're from one particular corner of the state or another, it's really easy to go to the wrong chili shop or to make some other mistake like that. And so I think that we have an advantage. I think as state party chairman, we're going to run a primary that's fair and transparent, and the best person will work through that process. And I'm really proud and pleased with the caliber of the candidates we have. Sometimes it makes a job a little bit tougher when you have so many people interested in a particular job. But I think there's no comparison between the Republican bench and the Democrat bench going into 22.
Well,
I
Derrick,
would, and if I could, Dr. Green, I think that Bob does have some merit there. I mean, I've publicly stated before that the Democrats need to develop their bench a little better. But what I will say is that the Republicans have an identity problem right now with who is the Republican Party. And, former President Trump has really splintered the party. And so now you got folks that are running against incumbents. Our own governor is probably going to have a primary when the election comes up again, because the Republican Party is splintered. So I think with that, there's going to be a considerable opportunity for Democrats. We may have somewhat of a bench problem, but you can't tell me if Sherrod Brown, our U.S. Senator, wanted to step down and run for governor, that he wouldn't win governor. I would bet on that all day long. Well, if Joyce Beatty stepped down from Congress and wanted to run for governor, I would imagine that she could be governor as well. So I don't think it's a bench problem, more so than the Republicans having a party identity problem.
Well, I mean, Sherrod would have to run. He needed a 13-1 money advantage to beat Jim Renacci by 6 points. So he better start raising the money soon if he's going to try to take on Mike DeWine in the governor's office.
Well, Bob, let me talk about another potential vacancy that I mentioned earlier, and that is for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. As far as I know, the current incumbent, Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, hasn't indicated one way or another publicly what she might do. But Republicans have held that post for a long time now. Do you think that the Chief Justice will run again? And if not, who would be the strong candidates on the Republican side?
Actually, Dr. Green, it's going to be an open seat because she's limited out.
I stand corrected, exactly.
So there are a number of different people talking about it. It's a lot of interest. As you might guess, over the last 3 weeks, I've been talking to every member of the Republican State Central Committee, and those individuals are elected to the committee by state Senate district. So it's a very grassroots organization that elected me chairman. And in those discussions, they're really concerned about the Supreme Court in Ohio. They see what the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania did for the Democrats, where they legislated from the bench and changed the rules in the middle of an election cycle. Without the consent or the authority that is clearly granted to the legislature. So people are really concerned in the Republican Party about the state Supreme Court, and it's going to be a major focus for us as a party going into next year.
Well, Derrick, one real bright spot for the Democrats in 2020 was with the Supreme Court races, where the Democrats were able to pick up a seat.
Yes.
Who do you see as the strong candidates on the Democratic side for the Chief Justice race?
Well, and you're right, Dr. Green. I mean, there has been some substantial inroads made on the Ohio Supreme Court. We were one justice shy of overtaking the court. This past go round, we were able to elect Jennifer Bruner. And so, you know, I can't give you one name that is going to rise to the top, but what I do know is that we're on a forward trajectory to be in a position where we're leading the court. So I know that there's going to be some very good candidates that are going to pop up across the state. You know, Judge O'Donnell ran this past November, and he was unsuccessful. But you know, who knows? He may run again. There are some other powerful judges around the state, young up and comers that have some good name identity. One being Jiza Page, who is a judge here in Franklin County. So, you know, we got some good young up and coming judges who may be going for that post in the near future.
Let's return here to a point that you made, Derrick, a little bit earlier, which are some of the divisions within the Republican Party surrounding President Trump. And I'd like to begin with Bob. Bob, what do you think is the short-term and the long-term legacy of President Trump for the GOP?
Well, yeah, I think the president clearly remains a force in politics here in Ohio and across the country. I think this idea that there's a civil war in the Republican Party is something I've heard so many times that if I had $1 for every time, I'd live in a much nicer house than I do right now. The fact of the matter is the Republican base, particularly in a place like Ohio, is pretty solid behind both President Trump and what President Trump campaigned on. There's this idea that there weren't any issues behind the president's campaign, and I think it's a false assumption. The president campaigned clearly on blue-collar working class issues, the kind of issues that resonated really well in Ohio, so well that talking about America first, making our allies pay their fair way, going hard on China, pushing back on China, and putting together a tax policy that made sense and removing regulatory burden to create jobs. Those issues resonated in his first campaign, which he won by more than 8 percentage points, which is a blowout in Ohio politics for a presidential candidate. And he did such an effective job in his first 4 years in office that he was rewarded with another 8-point victory last year in the state of Ohio.
Derrick, from your perspective, how do you see President Trump's legacy in the Republican Party, and what kind of effect might that have on the Democratic Party?
Well, you know, and this is my opinion, you know, former President Trump really destroyed the Republican Party as we know it. You know, there's conservatism, and then there's extremism. And former President Trump pushed the agenda of extremism and Trumpism. And that's not necessarily in line with the principles of the Republican Party. And that's relevant right now because you see so much infighting within the party at the federal, state, and the local level. I mean, when you have a governor like Mike DeWine, who is, you know, considered by most a somewhat popular governor, to be challenged, it will be challenged in 2022. That is a direct result of an extreme message, a Trumpism message, and the message is not necessarily about conservatism, but it's more about the selfishness of this former president.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. I think it's about time for us to go to our audience who've been very patient about various questions. So, Matt, do you have a question for us?
We have a number of questions, actually. So let me begin. I'm going to be working on combining some questions, too, because we have a number that focus around some similar issues. But the first question, I may just modify this slightly. The question is, what is the best strategy for those on the left to help flip Ohio blue in the future? And I'll just add, and then what are the strategies to keep Ohio red on the other side? How about that?
Well, Derek, you can try to answer the blue question.
Wait,
Sure. I'll start it. What'd you say, Bob?
could we switch? You do with the red, and I'll do the blue.
Well, one thing that I will say about what Democrats need to do is we have to talk to voters beyond the cities. We have to go out and talk to rural voters, and it doesn't have to be it can't be one of those conversations where you're just going out, sending out, some direct mail and a couple TV spots here and there. The field teams are going to have to get out into the rural counties and talk to people about issues that are relevant to them. Over the years, there's no reason why areas like the eastern part of the state are starting to turn red now. Those used to be all blue counties, and over the years that has diminished. And I think it's been solely because we have concentrated on the municipalities, and that's evident because Democrats control just about every major municipality in smaller communities across the state.
Bob?
Listen, I think it's important for us to continue to focus on the working class conservative issues that President Trump's election have shown us are so successful for Republicans. We're winning county commissioner races in Lorain County, Ashtabula County, Trumbull County, Portage County. I grew up in Akron. If you would have told me 20 years ago that we could win county races in those counties, I'd have said, you're crazy. Belmont County, we have every county elected official except the county engineer. What is happening is the Democrats have given up fighting for working men and women. Their focus is on sort of a smorgasbord of grievances and identity politics in their party. And that has left it open for us to reach out to labor union members, to other working class Americans, and to offer them a candidate that will fight for them, fight for what they believe in, fight for their jobs. We look at this, if you want to talk about a radical agenda, you look at the first month of the Biden administration, where they're taking all these actions to destroy as many jobs as they can. Oil and gas jobs, energy jobs that are being destroyed by executive order. And there's nothing there to replace those jobs. There are people that will be out of work. And as long as we continue our effort to focus on jobs and economic issues for average Americans, not Americans on the coast, but average Americans here in Ohio, we're going to continue to win elections.
Matt, do we have another question?
Yes, we have a number of questions related to how to diversify candidates and as well as people working within the parties. So what are ways that, and this is obviously for both parties, what are ways to encourage the recruiting of women candidates, candidates of color, and other populations that have historically been excluded?
One of the interesting features there, I think, has to do with women. Bob and Derek, you all will remember a couple of decades ago when term limits came to the legislature in Ohio. And there's a big argument about whether term limits are good or bad. But one of the expectations is that we would see a dramatic increase in the number of women elected to the legislature. And that really didn't happen. I think that was one of the big surprises to a lot of people. So let's start with women, but we can talk about other kinds of diversity as well. Derek, what's the Democratic Party doing to recruit more women office holders?
Well, first off, Dr. Green, I think that, whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, you have to be intentional about what you're doing in regards of diversity. The Ohio Democratic Party just recently elected Liz Walters to be the party chair. And so I think that was a major step in the promotion of women in very high profile positions, but we do have to be intentional about making sure that we are recruiting more women, making sure that we're recruiting more minorities, and making sure that, not only that we're recruiting these folks, but they have a diversity of ideas as well. So this party the Democratic Party has always been the party of diversity. The Republicans are catching up now, and I applaud them for that. But the Democrats have traditionally been the party of diversity and inclusion.
Bob, women candidates in the Republican Party, other kinds of diversity?
Well, look, we had one of our best congressional cycles ever for women candidates being elected to Congress as Republicans. In addition to that, prior to that, when I served on the Republican National Committee, we had our second female chairman of the RNC. We also at that time had more female state party chairmen than at any time in the history of the party. And I think that's where you see real change. And when people get involved and people take leadership roles, whether it be elected office or party office, that's where you see the big change. We did something we hadn't done before in any presidential election cycle for a Republican candidate, is we opened up campaign victory offices in African-American neighborhoods. And we were rewarded with better numbers in a number of different states among Hispanics and African-Americans, not just because of our outreach efforts through the campaign, but because of President Trump's policies that gave us record low levels of unemployment for those groups and others, most notably women and senior citizens as well in terms of the workforce.
And Dr. Green, if I could just add to my statement, my minority leader, Emilia Sykes, of course, who represents the Akron area, represents the University of Akron as well, has done a number of things to promote the promotion of women. I mean, she is the minority leader right now. She's created a PAC called We Belong Here. So there's a number of things that she has done, and others, when you, along with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, to promote women.
Well, thank you. Matt, do you have another question for us?
There's a follow-up question to that may be more appropriate for Dr. Green, although of course Bob and Derrick are both welcome to weigh in as well. There is a question about the Green Party, Libertarian parties, and other third parties, whether or not they are more attractive to some of these candidates who are not in majority represented populations, and whether they do a better job of recruiting women for political office and other candidates as well.
Well, there often is a lot of innovation that occurs in I call them minor parties that, because of the dominance of the two-party system, we often call them third or fourth parties. And so you often do see the entrance of new kinds of people, both in demographic but also ideological terms. But our parties are so polarized right now that it casts minor parties in a little bit different role. Historically, what minor parties did in the United States was they were a vehicle of protest. There were important groups of people, were important issues that the two major parties, for one reason or another, were not effectively addressing. But in a really closely divided electorate, the minor parties can actually be brokers. Oftentimes, they can't get their own candidates elected to major office, but they can determine, which of the two major party candidates win. But let me turn to Bob. Bob, what do you think about the Libertarians and the Greens and the other minor parties?
Look, I think in previous election cycles, they may have had more influence than they've had in the past. I know that was a big issue people talked about in 2016, and it clearly didn't have an impact. And I think in terms of the Libertarian Party, it's one of the more seasoned and more effective candidates that they've ever had. And I just don't know that it's something that that voters really look at and consider beyond the fact that it's a protest vote instead of leaving, an undervote and leaving the spot blank.
Yeah,
What would you do?
yeah, I agree with Bob on that. I see that, folks that are members of those parties, is more of a protest vote than anything. The Democratic and the Republican Party are the two major parties that people either take a side on, depending on what your ideological thoughts are. When you have candidates from the Green Party or from the Libertarian Party, they typically going in to these elections knowing that they're not going to win, but they want to make sure that they get their platform out to people.
Matt, another question for us?
Yeah, we have a couple questions following up on the redistricting topic that you already discussed. And so one of those is, what can be done to ensure that the diversity of Ohio is going to be fairly represented in both the redistricting process and in the maps themselves?
Well, let me just address that and then turn to my colleagues here. One of the real challenges of redistricting, no matter how you do it, is that there are a lot of different values at stake. Some people think that representing the diversity of the electorate is the primary value. Other people think having competitive elections is another one. Other people say that representing communities of interest, whether they're political or demographic, is an important value. But the problem is it's hard to maximize all three of those simultaneously, not to mention a whole bunch of other values that people have. So redistricting always ends up being some kind of compromise between these values, all of which in the abstract are important. Derrick, what do you think about, will redistricting better reflect the diversity of Ohio this year? And if not, what can be done to ensure that?
Well, a lot of that is going to depend on where the data from the Census Bureau, puts us in terms of population, where the population growth is, where the population has declined. As I said earlier, there are things that the legislature can do right now. The legislature can pass a public submission bill so that you can get public input. I would even challenge my friend Bob, now that he's chair of the party. Once we get a set of maps, would you have a public hearing in each one of the congressional districts so that we can publicly debate the maps and get public input from people across the state?
Well, Bob, it's your turn.
Well, here's one of the challenges with this. A lot of this is based on geography. You have to draw geographical lines. And it's the Democrats at a real disadvantage here. If anyone really wants to geek out and get into this issue, Bill Bishop wrote a book in 2009 called The Big Sort, and it talks about the fact that Democrats and Republicans are geographically self-selecting. And so you see concentrations of Democrats in urban counties and concentration of Republicans in suburban and rural counties. And that presents a problem when you have to draw a geographical legislative map.
What about Derrick's idea of having debates on the maps?
I guess you could. It's a matter of time at this point. We're already going to be 5 or 6 months late on the census data. I think the Attorney General has sued to try to get that sooner. It's not like we're doing these things with an abacus. We've got computers, this stuff can be done. But in terms of hearings and things, I don't run the redistricting commission. There's a legislative commission and the legislative leaders do that, and they can do whatever they want to on that process. I don't think there's any problem with it. I would say this, that, part of the reason why this process is set up the way it is people vote for elected officials to represent them. We live in a republic, not a democracy. So not everything is voted on. And so when they do make a decision on voting for Secretary of State or auditor or governor and in the legislative races, they're taking a role in that process at that point.
Yeah, and what I would say, I mean, fair enough, Republicans have won all of our constitutional seats that are on the reapportionment board. So you're clearly going to have the pen, you know, but if you really want to be fair about this thing, you want to make sure that the legislature is passing a public submission bill, which they're required to do by law.
Right.
And let the public give input as to what type of maps could potentially be drawn. And then once we get the census data in September, then let's have some debates around the state and some public hearings about it so we can discuss it.
I'm not an expert on the process, but correct me if I'm wrong. If the legislature doesn't pass a map that is supported by both parties in the legislature, then we do go through that exact process that you talk about. Maybe not completely to that detail, but they do go to a more public process at that point if the two parties fail to agree in the legislature. And look, you know, whether or not they can do that remains to be seen. But if that happens, then, you know, if that doesn't happen, then it's my understanding that that's exactly what the process is.
Matt, do we have another question?
Yeah, we'll move on from the redistricting, but that was actually one of the questions, whether there could be public input in each district. So you've already kind of talked about that a little bit. So we'll move on here. This was a hot topic, obviously in 2016, but I think it's also was talked about in 2020 as well. And that's the question of polling. So polling, you know, seems to be more and more challenging. And it's being challenged by many. Is it still an effective tool for campaign strategy?
Well, I'll turn to our panelists here. Derrick, what do you think about the state of polling and its effectiveness?
Well, you know, polling can be effective, but you have to do it repetitiously. And the bottom line is, you know, cell phones kind of changed the game with polling because, you know, people don't want to talk. There's so many telemarketers out there. When you do get someone that's legitimately a poller and wants to talk, you know, generally those questions take 5, 10, sometimes even 15 minutes. And we're just a busy society. So people don't necessarily want to talk to people because they're annoyed by telemarketers. They're annoyed by the potential of fraud or somebody trying to get information from them. And so we have to get more creative as to how polling is done. And if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of polling, you actually have to spend a little bit more resources and maybe even do focus groups to get some of the information that you need.
Bob, what's your perspective on polling?
I think there's two ways to look at this. One is a practitioner, which I'm going to set that aside here, but then also as the public. And I think where the problem comes from and where there's consternation among polling is that a poll will be done and all of these, it really matters, the type of sampling, the type of outreach, the modeling that goes into place, how they adjust numbers and try to get whole totals. And then these things come out, they're reported in the press, and in some ways they're reported almost as fact. Like, this is the horse race, this is where we are. And people look at that because it's a simple, easy thing to digest when you're trying to understand what's happening in something as dynamic as a human generated political process. You want to, there's a tendency for people to take a hold of those polls, whether they're in the media or whether they're just average people, and give credence to that. And that's not the way polls should be used. I mean, as a practitioner, you look at polling, as Derrick said, focus groups, you look at modeling, you look at all these different factors. They're tools, and you use them in certain ways to make certain kind of decisions. And the problem is when you're trying to report on something as exciting and dynamic as a political race, they're too often used as the only measurement, and it's sad, but you know they're not perfect.
Well, after all, one of the first things we talk about with polls is the margin of error, and but I would agree with both of you that real challenges, technical challenges facing pollsters these days. And those challenges are not, I think, widely recognized outside of the polling and practitioner circles, but I think those things really are better understood. Matt, other questions?
One of the other questions, I'm going to kind of summarize several here about voting. One of the questions is, will the continued rise in voter turnout, will we continue to see a higher percentage of voter turnout, like, both in 2016 and then in 2020, it increased a lot. Is that trend going to continue? And then how does the more mail-in voting or more virtual voting, if you will, brought on by COVID-19, how might that affect the future of voting?
Well, let's turn to Bob first. Bob, are we going to have a high turnout like we had in 2020 going forward?
I really think it's too early to say. We're going to need to see who the candidates are. I think that's a big factor in a high turnout election. I'll say this: the election turnout was much higher than I thought it was going to be, even when we looked at different projections and things. I think it's good when we have high voter turnout. Again, I just don't know. It's hard to predict without that. In terms of mail voting, I mean, listen, mail voting here in states like Ohio, where there's safeguards and measures, and that the voter that's requested the ballot is the one that gets the ballot, and they're the person that votes the ballot, and you can validate that when it's returned to the Board of Elections. I think that's perfectly fine here in the state of Ohio. And I think in other states, when there's a lot of games and rules that are changed, that makes it more problematic. But listen, we're blessed to live here in Ohio for many, many reasons. That just happens to be one of them.
Derrick, what about high turnout?
Yeah, listen, we had high turnout in the last presidential election. We had high turnout in this most recent presidential election because we had very interesting candidates on the ballot. I think that when you have interesting candidates on the ballot, then that motivates people to get out to the polls. But the bottom line is, in terms of voting and mail voting and all this types of stuff, we have to make voting easier in our state, not more difficult. There is so much technology out there that we can make voting easier for all people, so that we have even higher turnout in future elections.
Matt, another question?
One of the questions has garnered a lot of interest lately at the federal level is the return of earmarks, or the potential return of earmarks. And so we have a question here: how do you both feel, or the three of you feel, about earmarks? And then how might it affect Ohio specifically?
Derrick, earmarks, good, bad, indifferent?
Listen, I'm old school. I think earmarks are good. It's one of those things where if you are, it really tests your political skills when you're in elective office. Earmarks are good for communities. When you can get an earmark for a certain community or a major project, that puts people to work. And so I am personally in favor of earmarks.
About earmarks?
Yeah, listen, I think Derrick's right. I think it does a couple different things. It allows individual legislators to do something for their district that's very difficult to do without a vehicle like that. I think that there was a knee-jerk reaction, I think, in some from elements from both parties on these issues, when you have something that appears to most people as being an outrageous example of government spending. I mean, there's plenty of those. You don't need earmarks to be the villain to demonstrate that point. But I think Derrick's right. I remember some of the projects and things that were delivered by both Republicans and Democrats that represented Ohio in Congress, and those were good, solid things. And I think it would be best for the legislative process, and probably for discipline in the Congress as well, for the parties to bring those back.
Well, I think we're on the court here. I'm glad that earmarks are coming back, personally. I always thought they were a good thing for all the reasons both of you mentioned, but also because it facilitates compromise. We need right now at the state and particularly the federal is an ability to compromise. Sometimes you can't get to a compromise on the main issue because there legitimate differences that are deeply held, but you can work around the edges if you can have earmarks. And let me just add, as a former college president, I love earmarks. So next question, Matt.
Well, I will just add to that discussion, one of the best defenses I've heard of earmarks from one of the most surprising sources was former Congressman Ron Paul. And he talked about, who was not exactly, fiscally, well, he was very fiscally conservative. Earmarks also came with responsibility, and you could see where the money was being directed and whatnot. So anyways, I just always remember that a lot of people were surprised that he was a defender. All right, one of the questions we have here is already looking forward, not just to 2022, but 2024. So the question is, will there be any flipping of the House back to, of course, a Republican majority? And then also in 2024, which the question acknowledges is a long time away, an eternity in politics, but it may be because of the recent CPAC conference that just happened, and there were some straw polls there. Who might be the nomination, who might be nominated by the Republican Party if it is not Donald Trump?
Well, let me refocus that a little bit, and we'll turn to you first, Bob. Is Donald Trump the presumptive front runner for the Republican nomination in 2024? And if not, who are some of the other candidates that you see running in that year?
Well, look, I think if he decides it's something he wants to do, I think he is. I'm not sure that that's something he's going to do or not. I'm not sure he even knows the answer to that. I do know this, that he is engaged, he's active and involved in some of these other races that are taking place. But we have a lot of good candidates that could potentially run for president in 24. It's so far out, though. I really wouldn't want to get into that kind of guessing game this far out.
Well, Derek, let's think about the Democratic side. I mean, the presumption, I think, would be that the current president of the United States, Joe Biden, would be the nominee of the Democratic Party in 2024. But let me ask you, given that there are divisions among Democrats, just like there are among Republicans, what do you see realistic prospects that President Biden might be challenged in the 2024 Democratic primaries?
Again, as Bob said, I mean, that's a little far out to make predictions, but I can almost tell you for certain if President Biden is still president at that time and he delivers on his promises, that I don't think that there's going to be a primary against him. Now, if he decides not to run, Vice President Kamala Harris, I'm sure, is going to run for president someday. So I think that we have a very healthy bench on the Democratic side when it comes to presidential candidates.
But I know that we're sort of coming to the end of our time. Matt, do we have maybe one or two more questions?
Yeah, we actually have a number of questions, and if we're okay to continue for a few more minutes, we have a number of questions yet, so we could go for a few more minutes if everybody's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So one of the questions is, do you see areas where there can be bipartisan agreement between the two parties to get things accomplished for Ohio? Are there things that, in this highly partisan time that the two parties can come together on? One of the ideas might be infrastructure. Is there something like that could help Ohio?
Derrick, do you see places for bipartisanship?
Absolutely. I think that there's always room for bipartisanship. You know, one of the easy areas as Matt had mentioned, is infrastructure. You know, we have an incredible need for infrastructure in our state. You know, we have bridges that are falling apart. So I think that there is definitely some room there to have some bipartisanship. And you know, listen, I'm not an elected official. Have never been an elected official, but if I was, I mean, I would approach the Republican Party, and you know, if I were a Republican, which would never be, but if that happened, I would approach the Democratic Party and say, listen, let's get 2 or 3 things that we can just pass. Let's just pass these 2 or 3 things that we can agree upon, and everything else is fair game. I don't know why we can't do that both at the state and the federal level.
Bipartisanship?
Under President Trump, we did, pass the First Step Act that did prison reform and gave people in this country a second chance in a lot of instances. It didn't get talked about a lot. We talked about it on the campaign a lot. Didn't get discussed in the media very much because obviously it was something that President Trump did with Democrats that was good and positive for the country. So the capacity, I think, is there. If you look at what can get done here in Ohio, I think that there has been some efforts to do things on the Great Lakes, to do things with electric vehicles, to step up into certain areas where there's an opportunity to either save or create jobs in the state of Ohio. And I think those things can continue. I think we look at that though today versus how things were, and Derrick and I are both old enough to remember 20 years ago. The delegation, I think, worked a lot better together 20 years ago than it does today.
And I would add to that, I think there was much better cooperation at the national level across parties on a wide variety of.
Absolutely.
Another question, Matt?
This one also has been getting a lot of press lately. This is around social media. So how do you see political outreach changing as social media censorship or just social media policies increase and change?
Bob, you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I will. I think it's a very high risk, low return proposition for the social media companies restricting conservative speech. It's something that is demonstrative, that we can demonstrate actual incidents and cases of it. It doesn't stop people from getting information, though. I mean, if the effort is here to kind of silence conservative voices, all it does is elevate the issue. I have talked to voters, and I am just shocked how more educated people are today than they were 10, 20 years ago. There are people that wouldn't know what the filibuster is. I walk in to meet people on the street that can tell me that, the merits and the demerits of the filibuster in great detail. And this is a guy that delivers, refrigerators for a living. So it's astonishing to me that that a lot of the Silicon Valley types are trying to squelch conservative speech are doing this because they put themselves at tremendous risk of either regulation or they're in the business of making money. So I'm not sure why they think that this is a smart move on their part.
Derrick, social media?
Well, listen, social media, and I'm all about the First Amendment and free speech, but you got to be very careful as well. I mean, social media was really the linchpin that has fueled this QAnon movement. The lies about the election being stolen. I mean, all of that has been fueled by social media. But I think that people should have their right to voice their opinions and their voice. But at the same time, we have to disseminate what's fact and what's BS.
Matt, do we have time for one more question?
Yes. Um, here's a question I probably should have asked before, but it's a number of them are coming in now are around this general theme. Is it possible for Ohio Republican candidates to win a primary without the former president's endorsement?
A really good question. Bob, what do you think?
Well, I think I know a lot of candidates that are running are seeking that endorsement. I'm not sure that's the case here in the state of Ohio. I mean, there are other places in the country that he didn't win by 8 percentage points. It's a resounding win. I mean, Barack Obama won the state, I think, during his reelection, 160,000. George W. Bush, 118,000. Over 500,000 for President Trump. It's a significant impact here. So I would have to say yes at this point.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Bob, that the United States is, of course, a bunch of states, right? And there are different kinds of politics in different places. But Derrick, let me ask you, would you see, thinking of this from the Democratic point of view, if a candidate were endorsed by President Trump and won the Republican nomination, do you see that as a potential liability in a general election?
For a Republican candidate or?
Republican candidate.
I'm sorry, rephrase your question. I'm sorry, Doctor.
If a Republican candidate were to win a primary with an endorsement from the former president over a candidate that wasn't endorsed, in a general election, would that be a liability for the Trump endorsed candidate, in your opinion?
Well, I agree with Bob again. I think it depends on where it is. People, for the most part, seem to have common sense in this state about, what is good and what's fact and fiction. Part of the reason why the former president was popular among Republicans, in my opinion, is because he was a charismatic leader. Now, I say that with a caveat. He was very charismatic, but his policies didn't necessarily help the common man and woman in this country, in my opinion. So people like the celebrity of him, but the policies were trash. I mean, when you really break it down, the policies were just not good for the country. And so I think that this fad of former President Trump is just going to be that. It's going to be a fad. I think that as time moves on, the party is going to move back towards the center of conservatism, and it will be a party that you will actually recognize. Because right now, I don't recognize this Republican Party. And I think that a lot of Republicans don't recognize it either, but they're afraid of the repercussions that comes from a former President Trump.
I couldn't disagree more. You should recognize some of it, Derrick, because the issues that are helping us win elections are issues that Democrats used to champion, and they no longer do. And because of that, we have a winning formula in the state. The president had, prior to the pandemic, we had one of the greatest economic recoveries ever. We had China, actually, we had an elected official that didn't just talk about China, but stood up to China. We were getting peace treaties done in the Middle East. We were getting our NATO allies to pay their fair share. And we saw manufacturing jobs increase, jobs that no Democrat thought would ever come back. So while we had to engage this campaign through the prism of a pandemic, I think you're missing the point. There was a set of issues and ideology behind President Trump's campaign, and whether you call it America First or whatever, it resonated in Ohio. We won big in 16 and 20, and it was good enough that we didn't just win in 18, but we picked up Republican candidates at a time when President Trump was not on the ballot. We won county commissioner races because those candidates campaigned on issues that used to be basis of the Democrat Party, but no longer are.
Well, we're just about to run out of time, but Derrick, we'll let you have the last word on the potential impact of Trumpism on voting.
Well, first off, thank you again to you, Dr. Green. Thank you, Bob, for always being a good friend and a gentleman, and the Greater Akron Chamber, and of course the University of Akron Bliss Institute. And thank you again, Matt, as well. You know, I think that we are at a critical juncture in our lives. You know, the gains of the 60s and the civil rights movement and all of those things are being challenged right now. You know, extremism is at an all-time high, racism is at an all-time high. And if we don't collectively come together as people and sit down and talk about these issues and create an environment where people can be heard, then, you know, our democracy is going to be at stake.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate your input. And Matt, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate this conversation. I think this also demonstrates the tone of civility. I did not mention specifically at the Bliss Institute, but we do have the Greater Akron Civility Center, and I think this shows that we can have good conversation that's spirited, but that is also civil and truly among friends. So I want to really thank Dr. Green. I want to thank Derrick, and I want to thank Bob for being with us today. Tremendous conversation. And I just, again, please, everyone, stay on the line. We're just going to take a very short break here. You can grab a cup of afternoon coffee if you need to, or I guess it's after 4 o'clock, so you could grab a glass of wine, as we'd be doing in Washington right now for the Ohio birthday party. And we'll begin that in just about 5 minutes. We'll have a number of our both state and federal elected officials, greetings from them, as well as a cutting of the Ohio birthday cake. So that starts in just about 3 or 4 minutes now at 4:15. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gary Miller. It's my honor to serve as president of the University of Akron. Today we're celebrating the 218th birthday of our great state of Ohio. While this celebration is different from our in-person celebrations in past years, I'm grateful that we can gather virtually to celebrate Ohio's birthday. This time last year, on March 4th, 2020, we celebrated the Ohio birthday party in person, just prior to COVID-19 shutting down in-person events. Few of us thought the pandemic would still be with us a year later, and few of us thought we would see the economic and political challenges we faced in this last year. Nonetheless, the people of this state have shown tremendous resilience and courage in overcoming these challenges, and will continue to rise above them thanks to our strong leaders who care so deeply about this state, its people, and our future. In just a moment, we'll hear from Ohio elected officials at the federal and state level. I want to thank them for their leadership during this challenging time and for their advocacy on behalf of our great state. I also want to thank the sponsors who make the Ohio birthday party and its related events possible. We appreciate your support, and I want to especially thank our sponsor, the Greater Akron Chamber, for producing this virtual event. Now let's hear from our elected officials.
Hello, I'm Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. This week we celebrate Ohio's founding 218 years ago. While President Thomas Jefferson endorsed Congress's decision to grant Ohio statehood on February 19, 1803, we recognize Statehood Day on March 1st, when the Ohio General Assembly met for the very first time. Ohio's birthday is certainly something to celebrate, and I want to thank all the sponsors and supporters of this great event. Typically, this birthday party is an in-person celebration. I appreciate that this year, organizers decided to change to a virtual format to ensure the health and safety of everyone involved, and we thank them for that. While the coronavirus pandemic has taken the lives of so many Ohioans and changed our way of life for the past year, it has also brought into contrast the amazing fortitude of Ohioans and cast a spotlight on some real heroes. Among those heroes are healthcare workers who for months have risen to the challenge of caring for COVID-19 patients. Our EMS workers who have often been the first to respond to those with the virus. Our nursing home staff members who, through it all, have been brave and compassionate frontline caregivers. And our law enforcement officers who in these difficult times have continued to see to the safety of our communities. And our children's services workers who, despite the pandemic, are working for the welfare of vulnerable kids every single day. And then we have our educators who have followed pandemic protocols to keep students in the classroom, and when that wasn't possible, have taken steps to provide the best instruction that they could online. And our business owners and employees who have taken the necessary steps to safely provide goods and services to the people of their communities. If history has shown us anything, it has shown us that Ohioans are resilient. I have confidence that we will come back from this pandemic stronger than ever. And as the vaccine reaches more and more people in the coming months, 2021 will be a year of recovery and will mark a return to strength. And that is certainly a reason to celebrate. Happy birthday, Ohio.
Well, happy 218th birthday, Ohio. My name is Frank LaRose, and I serve as the 51st Ohio Secretary of State, and this is an event that I look forward to every year. In fact, going back to 2011, I've been with you all every year for this gathering, and it's always a great opportunity for a reunion. I kind of view this as the chance to bring together the Ohio diaspora. We have Ohioans working in D.C., and we have Ohioans serving in D.C. in government capacities. We've got Ohioans that come to D.C. frequently for work, and every year in celebration of our Statehood Day, we gather together, and it's the work of the Ohio Society of Washington, D.C., the University of Akron, and these great sponsors that help bring it together that make it possible for us to gather. Of course, it's always a packed room, a lot of energy, cutting the cake and spending some time raising a glass with one another. And of course, that wasn't possible this year, but I look forward to being with you all next year as we celebrate Ohio's 219th birthday. Now, the work that I do as Ohio Secretary of State is a mission that I truly love, and we've got a great team that shares that sense of mission. We were able to run a fair and honest election in the midst of very challenging circumstances last year in 2020. And by the way, the most successful election Ohio has ever seen when you consider the fact that we had more voters participate in that election than have ever participated before. Close to 75% of Ohio's registered voters participated in a free and fair election. In many ways, Ohio's an example for the rest of the nation to follow as it relates to elections administration. The other side of our office is where we help new businesses get started, and I'm happy to report that 2020 was a record-breaking year in that regard as well. We saw over 170,000 new businesses start right here at the Ohio Secretary of State's office. Now, this is not a perfect economic indicator, and we know that some small businesses won't go on to become successful or profitable, but here's what it tells me. It tells me that Ohio entrepreneurs have a fundamental optimism. They're doing what they do best, and that is going out there and creating value in our free market economy to help their fellow Ohioans work and live their American dream. And we're happy to say that they're doing it at record-breaking numbers, and we look forward to that continuing in 2021 and beyond. I'm optimistic about the future of Ohio. As we celebrate this 218th birthday of our great state, I think about the opportunity to gather with you all next year as we raise a glass to 219 great years of the Buckeye State. So here's to Ohio. God bless each and every one of you.
Hi, I'm U.S. Senator Rob Portman. I've got my Ohio State Capitol tie on today, and I'm pleased to join you in helping to celebrate our birthday, the 218th birthday of the Buckeye State, which joined the United States of America on March 1st, 1803. This past year has been one of the toughest in the history of our state and our nation. The unprecedented healthcare and economic challenges caused by COVID-19 have affected all of us, and my thoughts, of course, are with Ohioans who have suffered from loss during this time, including some friends of mine who've lost their lives. But this past year has also proven to me something that I felt for a long time, that we're a resilient state. Through this crisis, I've been inspired by the stories of Ohioans who have given their time, given their energy toward helping others. Our world-class healthcare professionals have worked day and night to get patients fighting COVID-19 the care they need. We've worked on all kinds of technologies, even on the vaccines and so on. Our frontline workers have continued to operate grocery stores and other essential services. Our truck drivers haven't stopped. And whether it's through volunteering at our food banks, signing up to be a COVID-19 contact tracer, or simply donating some spare time or money to a local charity, everyday Ohioans have demonstrated their spirit of giving back in so many ways. It's also reminded me of how proud I am to have the privilege of representing Ohio in the United States Congress. Ohioans are tough. I know that our state will rebound following this challenge. Next year, I hope we'll once again be able to come together to celebrate the 219th birthday as an example, and I'm sure we will. But today, I'm pleased we're able to get together virtually to celebrate Ohio, to celebrate what a great state we have. And I want to give a special thank you, of course, to the sponsors who have made the Ohio Birthday Party possible again this year. So to everybody, happy birthday.
Hi, I'm Congressman Troy Balderson, proudly representing Ohio's 12th Congressional District. One of the reasons I love Ohio so much is our sense of community. In Ohio, we're all Buckeyes and we stick together. That's never been truer than during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Our state has rallied together to support our communities, including our small businesses, schools, and of course, our frontline healthcare workers. Beyond just that, I love that when I'm home in Zanesville and I see neighbors and folks I grew up with who are now my constituents, we can speak with each other like nothing has changed over the years. Ohio is home for me. Ohio is about community. And as a community, we are all going to make it through this pandemic stronger than ever. We need to continue supporting our small businesses, schools, and healthcare workers. We need to do our part to get vaccinated. It's not going to happen overnight, but we will get there. We will recover. I want to thank tonight's sponsors, the Ohio State University, the University of Akron, the Ohio Society of Washington, D.C., Case Western University, Kent State University, Inter-University Council of Ohio, the University of Cincinnati, University of Dayton, and the Ohio Forum. Thank you also to everyone who made this virtual birthday celebration a success. And for all who are watching right now, happy birthday, Ohio.
Hi, friends. I'm Congressman Bill Johnson. Just a quick, short video to say, happy birthday, Ohio. You know, our state has played such an important role in the legacy of our country. Were it not for four great Ohioans, Salmon Chase, Ulysses S. Grant, William Sherman, and Philip Sheridan, helping Abraham Lincoln make it through the Civil War, I don't know if we'd be the nation that we are today. And then you've got the greats after them, the Wright brothers, John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Thomas Edison. And did you know that the first oil well drilled on the North American continent is right here in our great state? We've got so much to be proud of. And you know, we're going to make it through COVID. We're going to come out even stronger on the other end. We've got one of the most vibrant economies in the nation. I'm so very proud of all of the people in our state, especially the hardworking people here in Eastern and Southeastern Ohio. So what I want to say is happy birthday to the great state of Ohio. You've played a big role, and we've got a lot more left to do. God bless. Have a great day.
Hello, everyone. Congressman Dave Joyce here. I have the honor of representing Northeast Ohio in the People's House. Having grown up and lived my entire life on the North Shore of America, my favorite memories revolve around Lake Erie. From having my vacations with our family in my youth, to learning how to fish at the 72nd Street Pier, those memories are a stark contrast with what we're going through these days. This past year has been a dark one. COVID-19 has put countless unprecedented challenges on our path. But if there's one thing I know, is that Buckeyes are the most resilient people in America. That resiliency sets Ohio apart from everywhere else in the country. We will make it to the other side of this pandemic, and we will be stronger than we were before. We're in this together, Ohio. Thanks to all the folks at Ohio State University, the University of Akron, the Ohio Society of Washington, D.C., Case Western Reserve, and everyone else.
Hello, everybody. Congressman Anthony Gonzalez here from Ohio's 16th District, which is in the northeast portion of our beautiful state. And I just want to thank everybody for having a moment to be able to celebrate with you all our great state and our great state's birthday. Just as we always do, Ohio has come together in incredible ways across the entire state to help us navigate through what has been an incredibly difficult time and a frustrating time. Obviously, we all want to be together. The Ohio birthday celebration is always, frankly, one of my favorite parties in all of DC. It's always great to see everybody, to catch up, share a few laughs, and just enjoy our time together celebrating the Buckeye State. And though we can't do that in person this year, the good news is there's life at the end of the tunnel. There's light at the end of the tunnel, excuse me. And we will be back together very soon, continuing to celebrate our state. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for the sponsors who make this all possible. I can't wait to see you all as soon as we can. I hope everybody stays safe and healthy. God bless, and happy birthday to the great state of Ohio.
Hi, I'm Congressman Bob Latta, and I represent the 5th Congressional District. I want to wish Ohio a very happy birthday. I think Ohio is the greatest state you can be from. And when you think about all the things that we have here, we can always count our blessings. You know, from everything from our farming to our manufacturing to education, we just have everything right here. When I look at my district and here in Northwest, West Central Ohio, I have over 60,000 manufacturing jobs. I have the largest farm income producing district in the state. And when you think about when your ancestors might have moved here, my mom's side, on both sides of her family, they came here in the 1840s down in Putnam County. They farmed. My dad's family, we're not even sure when they walked into Ohio from Pennsylvania, but it was a long time ago. And they settled in Hancock County. But there's so many things that gave people opportunities, and they knew that not only would they have opportunities, but they'd have opportunities for their kids. And that's what we want to make sure that we always do for the future. And when we think about COVID and the work that we've been doing to make sure that we defeat this horrible, horrible disease, we want to make sure that Ohio comes out of it. And I know that before we went into it, the biggest problem we had in my district was, we couldn't find enough people to work. And we want to get back to that point. And I know that we're going to come out of it. So because Ohio is tough, we're resilient, we're going to make it. So I want to thank all the Ohioans for everything that you do. I also want to say, again, happy birthday to Ohio. It's the greatest state in the union.
Hey, it's Congressman Tim Ryan. Happy birthday, Ohio. I'm sorry we're not all gathering in Washington at the Library of Congress like we normally do every year. I want to say a special thank you to all the sponsors. It really is one of the great events of the year in DC when we get to see everybody from Ohio, all the interns, all the former interns, members of Congress, all together celebrating Ohio's birthday. So we want to thank all the sponsors, and obviously it's been a crazy year plus in Ohio. We are a strong and resilient state with strong and resilient people that have been through a lot. When you go back and you talk about our immigration patterns on how the state originally came together, whether you were immigrating from the South or you were immigrating up through the North, whether you were industrial on the farmlands or working in the coal mines or the steel mills or the rubber plants, or any manufacturing or working on the river. We have a strong people, and we will overcome what we've been through because we will do what we always do, and that's come together. And so, again, happy birthday to Ohio. So proud to represent this state. Go Bucks, OHIO, always. Happy birthday.
Hi, it's Congressman Steve Stivers. I wanted to wish Ohio a happy 218th birthday. You know, since 1803, Buckeyes have been leading the way. I know that this last year has been challenging for many people, but what makes Ohio great is our people. Whether it's the frontline healthcare workers, the people who kept our economy moving, the small business people who struggled through a tough time, or just every Ohio citizen who helped out their neighbors. That's what makes Ohio great, is the people. And so I want to say happy birthday to Ohio. I want to thank the Ohio Society for what is always a great birthday party. I know we may be doing it virtually this year, but the Ohio Society, Ohio State University, and all the organizations that help co-chair the Ohio Society, thank you for your involvement. Thanks for what you're all doing. And to every Buckeye citizen out there, happy birthday on March 1st. Happy 218th birthday to the state of Ohio. Have a great day, everybody.
As we wish Ohio a happy birthday, we have to look to Ohio's heritage. One of the great stories of Ohio's heritage is that we are the birthplace of aviation. Here in Dayton, Ohio, the Wright brothers' legacy is strong, as we have the National Park Service, the Wright Brothers Bicycle Shop, and of course Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, all great legacies of the innovation of the Wright brothers. As we celebrate Ohio, we must celebrate those who've made our heritage. So to Ohio, happy birthday.
Hello, Congressman Brad Wenstrup from Ohio's 2nd Congressional District, from the southern and southwest part of the state here. Ohio is the greatest state in our nation, plain and simple. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, and as a native Ohioan, I think I can speak for everyone when I say we are all blessed to call this state home. Ohio has given America more presidents than any other state. Perhaps more importantly, Ohio, and particularly Cincinnati, is the birthplace of the famed Cincinnati chili and famous ribs. Ohio is a place of opportunity and innovation. One of the greatest minds in our history, Thomas Alva Edison, who invented the light bulb and the phonograph, was a native Ohioan. For the sweet tooth out there, Ohio is the birthplace of Graeter's ice cream, Buckeye candies, and the Lifesaver candy. I'd be remiss not to mention our state's rich sports history as well. Not to mention great company like Procter & Gamble. Canton is famous for being the home of the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the birthplace of the National Football League. Our state is also home to the Cincinnati Reds, the oldest professional baseball team in the nation, founded in 1869. As a proud UC alum, I'm proud to cheer on my Bearcats just as one of the many world-class colleges and universities that call Ohio home. Of course, Ohio is not just known for its major cities, but also its small towns in between. Each time I drive through Adams County and the other rural counties in my district, I'm inspired by the resiliency of our small towns and communities, which continue to reinvent themselves. I'm proud to represent a district in a state with such tight-knit communities that are rooted in heritage and patriotic pride. I'm inspired when I see the banners lining our highways that bear the images of some of the men and women from their communities who serve proudly for our nation. I'm constantly reminded of the strong leadership in our state, both in Columbus and at the local level. I see it regularly in our law enforcement and first responders. I'm confident for the future of Ohio. We're the home to so many world-class hospitals and medical centers that are working on cutting-edge healthcare developments. We are home to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, where the oral polio vaccine was developed by Albert Sabin. As we continue to fight the coronavirus pandemic, I'm confident in our researchers and doctors who continue to be leaders in developing new treatments and new medical discoveries. I'd like to thank the sponsors of the Ohio Birthday Party who make this great event possible each and every year. Ohio is truly a wonderful state with incredible people. Ohio has it all. Happy birthday to you, Ohio. And as former Speaker John Boehner used to sing, bear with me, this is his song, and it goes like this. This is your birthday song. It doesn't last too long. Hey, God bless Ohio. God bless America.
We really appreciate the Ohio delegation members sharing their thoughts about our beloved state. And now to help with the cutting of the Ohio birthday cake, I'd like Elizabeth and Steve, two Ohio Birthday Party sponsors, to join me and introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Bartz, President and CEO of State and Federal Communications. We are a proud sponsor of the Ohio Birthday Party.
And I'm Steve Millard, President and CEO of the Greater Akron Chamber. We're also proud to support this year's Ohio Birthday Party.
Steve and Elizabeth, let's cut this beautiful Ohio birthday cake.
Happy birthday, Ohio!